Hey, what's going on, good people? So, with the excitement of the Sega Megadrive Mini going around, I thought I just had to get my Sega Saturn Mini wants and needs out there in this video. So I wanted to create a video to actually show you some Sega Saturn games that I feel would be best representative of the Sega Saturn itself. These aren't necessarily the best games on the system, but I feel like they will overall give you a good feeling if you had never played a Sega Saturn before. This selection of games will give you the best feeling of what that console was all about. The Sega Saturn is my second favorite console ever after the bad boy that is the Nintendo 64. I played the Sega Saturn when it was out, bought most of my collection when it was out, and the games I'm going to show you I have owned pretty much since they were released. So without further ado, let's get into this. The first game I want to show you is Sega Rally Championship. Now, Sega Rally Championship, in my opinion, is without a doubt the best racing game on the Sega Saturn. It's a fantastic port to the arcade, runs silky smooth, great music, great controls. Not many cars, there are only 3 cars technically, not many tracks, but what is there is absolutely essential play on the Sega Saturn. The next game I want to show you is Fighters Megamix. Fighters Megamix is essentially a mixture of many Sega IPs coming together, primarily Fighting Vipers and Virtua Fighter, with a mix of Virtua Fighter Kids, even some Virtua Cop characters in there, and the famous Daytona USA car, which you can see right on the back by here. Yeah, you can fight as a car, that's pretty bad. But Fighters Megamix is the 3D fighting game to play on the Sega Saturn. A must play in my opinion, and it should be on the Sega Saturn Mini. Next game is Burning Rangers. Sonic Team were on fire during the Sega Saturn era. Burning Rangers is a firefighting game in the future, 3D platformer, gorgeous lighting, beautiful characters, beautiful music, just an awesome game to play. Switch this around for you. Look at these screenshots. There were lighting effects in this game that just blew my mind back in the day of the Sega Saturn. This is a must-play game. Next game is Sonic Jam. Now, as many people may know, there weren't a real 3D Sonic game on the Sega Saturn, but Sonic Jam was a compilation of classic Sonic games, as well as a little 3D area hub that you could run around as a 3D Sonic and go to Sonic museums, check out FMV movies from like Sonic CD, which are freaking awesome. This game, I feel, should represent Sonic on the Sega Saturn. Next game is Tomb Raider. As I keep on saying to many people, Tomb Raider first appeared on the Sega Saturn, not that PS1. Lara Croft made her debut on the Sega Saturn. This was the game that got me to buy the Sega Saturn during its launch. Changed my life. This game was awesome. One of the best 3D adventures ever, still looks fantastic and should be represented on the Sega Saturn Mini. Next game, Athlete Kings. In terms of sports games, this is an absolutely awesome sports game. I think this should be the one that represents on Sega Saturn Mini. Beautiful high-res characters, gorgeous animation, great game. Should really be on the Sega Saturn Mini without a doubt, in my opinion. Next game is Shining the Holy Ark. In terms of RPGs, Shining the Holy Ark is one of the best on the system. Classic Camelot type of game. Well, perhaps before they were called Camelot, I can't quite remember. But Shining the Holy Ark is an awesome RPG. Should be played on the system. Excessively long, loads of characters, very in-depth, classic dungeon type of system. But yeah, this is an awesome game and should be represented on the Sega Saturn Mini. Next game is Nice into Dreams. Now, of course, Nice into Dreams, that everyone should know, is the quintessential Saturn game. It should be on every Saturn list in terms of played games. Absolutely beautiful game. 3D platformer in some respects, but you get to fly around the levels, time attack modes, all this stuff. Beautiful music, beautiful graphics, beautiful animation. A must play and a must own on the Sega Saturn. Next game I want to show you is Duke Nukem 3D.
Damn, those alien bastards are gonna pay for shooting up my ride.
In terms of first-person shooters on the system, I think this one best represents the Sega Saturn overall. People recognize the name. The Saturn port is absolutely phenomenal. Beautiful graphics, great gameplay. Duke Nukem 3D should be the first-person shooter representative on the Sega Saturn Mini. Next game, Saturn Bomberman. Now, Saturn Bomberman is an absolutely awesome version of Bomberman on the Sega Saturn. I used to play this with multiple multi-taps on the Sega Saturn with friends, but it has a great single-player mode as well, and as a party game, just as an enjoyable Bomberman game. Saturn Bomberman is a must-play on the Sega Saturn Mini, and it should be there. Next game, Virtual On. Virtual On is a 3D arena-based fighting game. Absolutely awesome game, full of robots. Look at the back of this game. Oh man. I used to play this in the arcades as well. It was so good. But yeah, Virtual On should be on the Sega Saturn Mini. It's a great 3D arena battle game. Everyone loves mechs. Everyone should love mechs. And this should be on the Sega Saturn Mini. The next game I have chosen is Virtual Cop 2. I haven't chosen Virtual Cop 1 because I think Virtual Cop 2 is the better game, and in terms of light gun shooters, in my opinion, this is the best game on the Sega Saturn. It can still be played with a controller. Of course, it's much better with a light gun. I got quite a few of those light guns, but Virtual Cop 2 is a must-play. Arcade perfection in my opinion. Play this loads and loads of loads. Replay value is fantastic. It's just a great game. Virtual Cop 2, must play. The next game is Baku Baku, or Baku Baku Animals I used to call it. Baku Baku is an absolutely awesome puzzle game. I used to play this loads on my Sega Saturn. It's one of my favourite Sega Saturn puzzle games. It's actually one of my favourite puzzle games ever. How the game plays, different food will fall down, a bit like columns. Then different animals will fall down. You got to match up those animals to the foods in order to reduce the blocks. It's great fun, got a great soundtrack, great replayability, and should be the puzzle game to play on the Sega Saturn Mini. And for the next game, Guardian Heroes. Of course, we've got to have Treasure representative on here. Guardian Heroes is one of my favourite 2D side-scrolling beat-em-ups ever. An absolutely awesome game, sublime animation. Even the Saturn struggles with the amount of sprites on this screen, but it doesn't take away from how awesome this game is. Guardian Heroes is simply a must-play Treasure game and a must-play Sega Saturn game, and should be on the Sega Saturn Mini. Next game is Virtua Fighter 2. Virtua Fighter 2 is, in my opinion, one of the best 3D beat-em-ups ever. In my opinion, this was better than Tekken 1, 2 and 3, and truly shows what the Saturn hardware was capable of and how good 3D beat-em-ups could be on the system. Virtua Fighter 2 is a must-play Sega Saturn game and should be on the Sega Saturn Mini. In terms of platform games, I nearly chose Bug Juice as the platform representative on the Sega Saturn Mini, but I changed my mind. Instead, I'm going to say Clockwork Knight 2. Now, Clockwork Knight 2 is an absolutely really fun platform game. In terms of Sega Saturn games, this face was pretty much all over the Sega Saturn advertising. It's fun, it's a bit like Pandemonium, but better in my opinion. Great soundtrack, really playable, should be on a Sega Saturn Mini as the platformer of choice. The next game I want to show is Resident Evil.
Rebecca Chambers, Albert Wesker, Resident Evil.
This is an absolutely fantastic port on the Sega Saturn. Add the extra battle mode. I used to play the hell out of this game. I still think it's great to play, still got a great atmosphere. Tank controls are still absolutely fine. Don't reject tank controls, people. They work perfectly well for this game. Resident Evil on a Sega Saturn is one of the best Sega Saturn games. A must own and a must play on a Sega Saturn Mini.
Captain Wesker, where's Chris?
Stop it! Don't open that door!
But Chris is...
Next game is Sonica. Can you feel that sunshine, baby? Now, a lot of people like to give this game a lot of stick. Graphically, it's one of the best games on the Sega Saturn. I love the soundtrack, absolutely love it. Can you feel the sunshine? Does it brighter? Oh god, yeah. Yeah, sorry about that. Sonica, yeah, the controls aren't perfect, but it's still a fun game, and I think everyone should at least try it on a Sega Saturn Mini. Next game up is the only Japanese only game I am going to show in this video, and that is Raging Silvergun. Yes, it's another treasure game, but treasure the awesome. And in terms of shoot 'em ups on the Sega Saturn, and we all know that the Sega Saturn is well known for having great shoot 'em ups, Raging Silvergun is the quintessential shoot 'em up on the Sega Saturn in my opinion. Absolutely awesome game, beautiful music, tight controls, great gameplay. Should be on the Sega Saturn Mini. In terms of 2D beat 'em ups, the Sega Saturn is famous for having great 2D beat 'em ups, especially from Capcom. I nearly chose Street Fighter Alpha 3, but instead I went with Marvel Superheroes. Now, in my opinion, Marvel Superheroes isn't necessarily the best 2D fighter game on the Sega Saturn, but it is still a great game, great gameplay, great soundtrack, and with Marvel being so hot at the moment, I think this would be a great game to have on a Sega Saturn Mini. Next game up, Die Hard Arcade.
Roger, we got a bad situation down there. We got a band of terrorists that has seized control of the building.
Die Hard Arcade, loosely based off the movies, obviously because of licensing rights, but this I used to play loads in the arcade, and the Sega Saturn has an absolutely fantastic port. Great 2D sky-scrolling beat 'em up in the vein of like Streets of Rage as we know, but this game it's just great fun, and I think should be on a Sega Saturn Mini if possible. Next game up, Panzer Dragoon, Saga. Without a doubt, this is the Sega Saturn game to play. The Sega Saturn game to own. Panzer Dragoon Saga is, in my opinion, the best JRPG ever made, just in my humble opinion, of course, but it's an absolutely incredible game, still possibly my favorite game ever, and is simply a must play and a must own on the Sega Saturn, and should, without a doubt, be on a Sega Saturn Mini. Team Andromeda were Sega just at their height. Awesome game. Sticking with Panzer Dragoon, Panzer Dragoon Spy. In terms of 3D shoot 'em ups, I still feel this is possibly the best 3D on-rail shoot 'em up ever made. The second game to make me buy the Sega Saturn, introduced me to the Panzer Dragoon universe. Absolutely phenomenal shoot 'em up, stunning soundtrack, stunning graphics, smooth as silk, and it's just simply a must-play game. Everyone should play Panzer Dragoon Spy. Next game, Dragonforce. Another Sega game here. This is an absolutely fantastic turn-based RPG. Great graphics, great sound, lovely anime intros and characters, really in-depth combat. This is simply a must-play on the Sega Saturn and should definitely be on a Sega Saturn Mini. And last but not least, Shining Force 3. Once again, a pre-Camelot game. You'll see elements of Golden Sun in this. This is an absolutely phenomenal RPG on the Sega Saturn. One of the best games on the Sega Saturn, one of the best RPGs ever made, and just should simply be on a Sega Saturn Mini because Shining Force is a massive Sega IP. Great game. So there you have it. Those were my 25 picks for the Sega Saturn Mini. I'm sure plenty of people would disagree with some of those picks, and that's fine because guess what? The Sega Saturn still has a wealth of other fantastic games, and if any of those games were swapped over for similar games in their genres, you wouldn't hear too many complaints from me. But in terms of an overall Saturn experience, I think these would be a great sample range of what the Saturn done for this time, and to give you a great feel of what the Sega Saturn was overall, especially if you weren't introduced to the Sega Saturn at the time. But yeah, thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts on what you would love from a Sega Saturn Mini collection. 20 games, 25 games, 15 games. Pick as many as you like and I will reply to every single one of you in the comment section below. Thanks for listening, take care all, and peace.